He could feel the heat emanating from her body, the subtle scent of her perfume wafting through the air, making his sense sharper. The rational part of his brain reminded him of the professional line that he was crossing, but the primal part of him was struggling to maintain control. He forced himself to look away, focusing his gaze back on the computer screen, pretending to study the email, all the while wrestling with the unexpected emotion that stirred within him. Inside his mind, a storm of thoughts raged. He knew he should not be feeling this way, that she was just his assistant, that he was her boss. But his mind refused to cooperate, and he found himself stealing glances at her, his eyes drawn to her lips once again, and the way her hair fell over her shoulders in soft waves. The tension in the room thickened, the air heavy with an unspoken electricity. He could feel his pulse racing, the thundering in his ears drowning out the usual office noises. He forced himself to speak, his voice coming out slightly huskier than usual. Jungkook. Yes, the email. He said, struggling to keep his tone neutral. Can you check one more thing for me? While not appearing to notice the slight shift in his tone, simply nodded, her attention still on the laptop. Of course, she replied, her own voice steady and professional. What do you need me to check? Jungkook, there's a document attached, he managed to say, his voice a bit rougher than before. Could you open it and cross-reference the information? I need it for the meeting later. Her fingers clicked the mouse to open the attached document, her eyes quickly scanning the content. She seemed completely oblivious to the effect she was having on him, engrossed as she was in the task. Right, sure, she said, her voice still calm and businesslike. Let me just match the data really quick. He watched her silently as she compared the numbers, her lips pursed in concentration. Every little movement he observed, the way her eyelashes fanned out over her cheeks, the way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. It was maddening how she was so close yet completely unaware of the effect she was having on him. He wanted to reach out, to touch her, to feel the softness of her skin under his fingers. But he forced himself to stay still, his hand clenching involuntarily on the edge of his desk. He had to get a grip, he told himself. He had to maintain professionalism. She was his assistant, nothing more. He took a slow, deep breath, attempting to steady his racing heart, and tried to concentrate on the meeting that lay ahead rather than the distraction right in front of him. After a few moments, Vine looked up from the screen and said, Vine, it's done, sir. The information matches. Her eyes met his brief, her expression professional but friendly. She seemed unaware of the strange atmosphere in the room, the tension between them, as thick as fog. He tore his gaze away from her, the simple act requiring a great deal of self-control. Jungkook, you can go now, he said, his voice a bit hoarse. He could feel his heart thumping in his chest, his body on edge, but he tried to keep his expression neutral. He could not let her see how affected he was by her presence. Vine nodded, gathering her things. Okay, she said, her tone still businesslike. With a parting smile, she headed for the door, the rustle of her skirt the only sound in the suddenly silent room. As the door closed behind her, Jungkook was left alone. Once Swan had left, he exhaled heavily, running a hand through his hair. In frustration, Jungkook, what the hell am I doing? He muttered to himself, his voice low and rough. He leaned back in his chair, taking a hand over his face, and he tried to sort through the jumble of confusing emotions that were coursing through him. He could not explain it, but there was just something about her that made his pulse quicken. Maybe it was her unwavering dedication to her work, her calm and cool aura, the professional demeanor she carried with her, and it had only been some months since she started working for him. Yet he found himself strangely drawn to her, in a way he could not quite understand. It was unlike any other interaction he would had with a male staff member. She was not some air-headed secretary who fawned over him. No, she was different. Despite the inexplicable pull he felt towards her, Jungkook forced himself to brush off the thoughts and focus on his work. He shifted his gaze back to the computer screen, the words and numbers on the screens slowly coming into focus. As he immersed himself in his task, the earlier stirring in his chest slowly subsided, his heart rate returning to its normal rhythm. He threw himself into his work, determined to ignore the disquieting feeling she awakened in him. In her cabin, Vine was in the middle of typing up some notes when her cell phone started ringing. She glanced at the screen and saw that it was her stepmother calling. With a mixture of annoyance and resignation, she picked up the call. Vine, hello, she answered, her voice polite but tinged with a hint of weariness. What is it? Her stepmother's voice came through the line, the familiar tone of disapproval and irritation evident. Vivian, where are you? She asked without preamble. She rolled her eyes and replied, her tone a little sharper than usual. When? Oh, just spare me the games, will you? Can't you just say why you called me? Inside she was already preparing for the usual criticism and judgment. Vivian, I don't want to listen to your voice either. Your father wants to say something. Come home tonight. It's been a month since she did not go to her house. She rented an apartment and lived there, peacefully without seeing their faces. One felt a pang of annoyance and a sense of dread at the same time, knowing that whatever her father had to say probably would not be pleasant. Without even bothering to respond, Wine quickly hung up the call. She let out a sigh, her patience already wearing thin. The thought of dealing with her father and stepmother, especially after a long day at work, was not something she looked forward to. She knew it would just be another opportunity for them to criticize and nag, and she was not in the mood for it. Her attention was suddenly diverted as a knock sounded against her door. She looked up to see her boss, Jungkook, standing hesitantly in the doorway. Jungkook, may I come in? He asked, his tone polite and businesslike, a bit different than how he normally sounded. She was surprised at his unannounced appearance, as he rarely visited her workstation like this. Nevertheless, she composed herself and nodded, gesturing for him to enter. Mine, of course, this is your office, sir, she replied, her voice neutral. What can I help you with, sir? Cook entered the room, his eyes briefly sweeping the space before settling on mine. Without preamble, he asked, Jungkook, have you eaten dinner yet? His tone was direct and matter of fact, a stark contrast to his earlier thoughts about her. I looked at him in surprise, a bit taken aback by the question and the unexpected concern in his voice. When, no, sir, she replied, her eyebrows lifted silently. Not yet, Jungkook. Good, now come with me, I am going to eat something. Without waiting for a response, he left from there. Vine was left standing there, her mind spinning as she tried to figure out what Jungkook had meant. Had he just invited her to dinner? Her heart fluttered a bit in her chest as she tried to wrap her mind around the strange situation. But he had left without waiting for her response, expecting her to just follow. Therefore, she stood there for a moment, grappling with a tangle of thoughts and emotions. Was this is a date or merely a friendly invitation? But they are not friends. Ryan, no, she muttered, trying to calm her racing heart. He is just my boss. Don't read too much into it. With a deep breath, she pushed aside her fluttering heart and hurried after him. She was his assistant after all. If he needed her to join him for dinner, then she would follow, simply fulfilling her job duties. As she followed him into the elevator, her mind was a whirlwind of confusion, but she kept her expression neutral. The elevator ride was silent, the air filled with a strange tension. She glanced at him from the corner of her eye, but he kept his gaze fixed straight ahead, giving no indication of his thoughts. Her mind continued to race, her heart pounding against her chest. What was happening? Why had he suddenly invited her to dinner?